I don't always go live on Facebook, but when I do it with Coach Mandy Baldwin. What's up, prospects? Hey, it's 6:30. We're going to give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on. Pretty pumped about today's show. As always, as soon as we get, 2 hours before the show, we end up figuring out, let's take this route instead. And we end up modifying a couple of the angles or a couple of the topics that we're going to do. That being said, we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. If you are already on, please make sure, go ahead and like, go ahead and share, go ahead and comment, and let us know where you're watching from. But we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on, and then within a couple of minutes, we're going to be feeding y'all with the best knowledge we've given y'all yet. What's up, Jen? We got Depew up in Wichita. Did you see his daughter?
Yes.
The 2020? Yeah.
Yes.
Legit. Love that kid. There we go. We got Kennebra in New Mexico. That's Brooke Kennebra.
What part of New Mexico?
All right, guys. Hey, if you can, Armando and Jocelyn made it back from their visit. If you can, if you haven't already, make sure that you do just like the perfect, always perfect Jessica Gibson. And make sure that you comment in the comments and let us know that you're on and let us know where you're watching from. We will go ahead and get started. Like I was saying earlier, we actually ended up deciding 2 hours before the show that we knew we were pretty pumped about what we had for y'all today. But we also had a couple of subtopics, excuse the verbiage. And we ended up deciding to kind of put those to the side because as we compared them to the chief topic of the show, they almost didn't compare. We almost felt guilty for occupying more of your time with those topics when we have the opportunity to get you some of this other information. And those of y'all that are on, y'all have probably already seen, you probably already know that the chief topic today is mental training, mental toughness. Me and Mandy were talking about it. You know, that's ever since I've known Mandy, that's been one of her fortes. That's been one of her pet peeves. Is I'll talk to her about a certain kid that I was told about, and I watched the video, this, that, and the other, and then she ends up telling me, like, the kid is weak. You know, and I'm like, well, I just saw her crush a bomb. You know, but at the same time, Mandy saw where when the kid ended up struggling at the at-bat, she goes in the dugout, throws her helmet, and ends up freaking out because she can't deal with failure.
Or my favorite is the lazy catcher. The catcher that's got a cannon, got a gun, and then all of a sudden she gets a pass ball and then mopes her way back there. Like, that's such a weak mental side. I'm so super stoked about tonight's conversation. As a former coach, it's something I had. If any of my former players are watching or listening, they're going to comment and say, absolutely, she's 100%, I am big time into the mental game.
And one of the things, like, most of us know, and most of y'all that are watching know, like, if you have kids, you know, or if you've been involved in youth sports for at least a decent amount of time, you know that ever since you were dealing with them as, youth players, t-ball players, coach pitch players, they talk about how getting them involved in team sports is going to help them in the long run, how it's going to teach them to work as a team, and how it helps them develop confidence and help them deal with failure and all that kind of stuff. And so, you hear about that stuff, but it's amazing to me that, like, later on in their career, they don't think about it as much.
Sure. Because they're worried about the outcome.
Yes.
They're too worried about the outcome and not focused on the process. And the mental side, if you don't have that mental foundation, it's very difficult to then try to compete at the next level. Again, that's the difference, Robbie. That's what I tell all my kids. The difference between high school and travel and college is that mental edge. Yeah. College, they're all going to be able to physically be there. Hit, throw, catch, pitch, you should. That's why you're at college.
And the thing that they don't talk about or don't think about, that, like me and you have talked about, like developing those different, and it's psychology.
Absolutely.
The mental aspect of who you are, knowing your capabilities, knowing what you are good at, knowing what you're not good at, knowing what you need to be working on, learning how to deal with not getting what you want, how to deal with not being the best, knowing how to deal with a failure. You know, those things, we talk about it and we analyze scouts, we analyze it in relation to a player and their ability to handle, because like we talk about, you know, why are we, when we're looking at pitchers and trying to analyze them for a solid D2 or D1 pro, why are we looking for a pitcher that misses bats? Because chances are, if they're missing bats at this, they're not going to miss bats like that at the next level. But if they're doing it at this level, when they get to the next level, they have enough command and enough movement, and you know, so we're projecting. So on the other end of that, if they're able to handle this stuff here, you know, you and I both know the best of players that we've ever seen get to the next level and they struggle. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a time where they struggle, and some of them have never had to deal with that struggle. Whether it's a pitcher who has always been King Kong, and then she gets somewhere and she gets a little bit of time, struggles, and you know, it doesn't mean it's game over for her and she's just never going to see mound time again, but she's not used to them having somebody else to where, hey, it's not your day, go have a seat.
Sure.
You know, and so I've seen this year, it's just kids, and I know 8 to 10 different kids that are freshmen that have gotten somewhere and ended up deciding halfway through, you know, February, you know, hey, I don't want to play anymore. And it's like, no, it's because whether it's parents, whether it is the team she was on, whatever it was, she was never forced to face failure.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not even failure, it's just changing roles. Like, learn to be a good teammate, learn to be a good, if your coach asks you to keep the book, or your coach asks you to help steal signs, you do it to the best of your ability. You be the best dang bookkeeper that you could possibly be. That is a mental edge that kids have to have. I mean, going back to the pitchers, that, you know, a pitcher has so much to worry about, but she really doesn't. If she can control in that circle her emotions, whether it's a good play, bad play, she has no control over what happens after she throws the pitch. Yeah. It's about being able to be mentally strong. That is what's going to separate the high school and travel ball players from the college athletes, is that mental edge. Who can fail, not field, fail better? Who can fail better?
Well, and one of the things that a lot of y'all probably don't even think about is, and I don't remember what the study was, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying this, but the NCAA frequently does a study about the hiring of ex-NCAA athletes. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, and I know there's like Enterprise Rent-A-Car and a couple of those other ones that like specifically target athletes that, you know, and my point to that is like, they know that regardless of what they did pre-college, they know that when they got to college and they played, they've endured failure, they've worked their way through success, they've learned time management, they've learned how to exploit their strengths while privately working on their weaknesses. There's a reason that, you know, your Fortune 500 companies, when they look at a resume and they see, oh, you played this, oh, you played it, oh, okay, they're automatically interested, and it's not because they're a fan of that particular school or something.
It's not because you batted 450.
No, and I mean, you and I both know it's because they know they've learned how to fail.
Absolutely.
And so my point to that, guys, is it's not something that's just for a prospect. And I realize a lot of that is the goal of the show, but like, you know, I have a 4-year-old, you know, and you know, me and my wife just got through having the discussion where, you know, she's a 4-year-old, and last year she played, I forgot what it was called. What was it called?
Intro to
T-ball or whatever.
Intro to T-ball.
Yeah, and it was just her and her, you know, boys and girls, and everybody does, you know, everybody wins, you know, that kind of stuff.
Everybody got a trophy?
Apparently. So, but now she was one of the only girls at her age that signed up to play. So they were wanting her to skip ahead with the older girls and go play coach pitch, where you get three pitches, and if you don't hit those, then they pull the tee out and bring it out. And when I told my wife, no, I want her taking the normal progressions. Even if she's out there with all boys, the boys are getting to do the normal progressions and go do baseball. You know, and like I told her, like, I'm not afraid to see her fail. You know, she can deal with it. You know, she's perfectly fine. You know, yes, we're talking about a 4-year-old. Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, like, I know previously with Madison, letting her fail and then letting her bring it to us, you know, that, yeah, Dad, I stunk it up that game, you know, this and the, well, what'd you need to do? And we had a grading system, like a school grading system. How would you grade yourself? B+, and I say, okay, wow. And she'd tell me, I did this and this, but man, I really stunk it up on this and this. Okay. You know, we really didn't have any input. She just had a sounding board. Mm-hmm. And so, but my point to that is that they talk about it in the youth. They talk about it in youth. And then they talk about it middle school-ish. And it seems like once it becomes prospect time or the recruitable age, they stop, which is probably one of the most important times because they're starting to form who they are. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, whether this is parents watching, travel coaches, or prospects, what you don't realize is the mental training that you're about to hear, and being able to take yourself through how to deal with failures and things like that. That is not just stuff that's going to help you right now as a prospect. That's not just stuff that's going to help you in college. That's stuff that is going to decide how quickly your career, after you graduate college, how quickly your career shoots through the roof.
And the funny thing is about this mental talk tonight is that I think it can seep into almost every area of your life. If you hear something, try to see how else it could be applied in your life, whether it's a job, whether it's weight loss, whether it's finances. You got to get there mentally. You got to get there mentally. So I think it transcends just softball, but I'm super stoked.
So without further ado, Jen, if you can go ahead and add yourself in. The guys, here in a minute, Jen Starkey is going to jump on here. She's probably doing it right now. Those of y'all that don't know, and I'll let her actually elaborate on her background. One of the biggest mental training and leadership training experts that I've come across. And, you know, being in the position that both of us are in, we run across a lot of them. And it's not to say that there's not some good ones. But Jen specifically, there she is.
Hey guys, I can hear you great.
Perfect. And so, Jen, one of the chief reasons, which Mandy actually mentioned it just before everything, and wanted you on, and as we got to talking about everything, we're like, oh, absolutely. As we got to figuring it, like, you can track it back all the way back to even like, I think it was a 1987 national championship where Pat Summit is like, you know, they have the practice the night before, and rather than, they have the entire gym, and rather than actually practicing and going through things, she has her girls have a seat on the floor, close their eyes, and she takes them through visualization exercise. You know, so-and-so is coming down the court, you know, Courtney, you're Gardner, you know, this, that, and the other, and now they're setting the screen. What are you going to do? And she's taking her through these visualization, and I'm not going to lie to you, I've always been a huge fan of Pat Summit, but like last night, you know, trying to go to sleep and watching, I think it was ESPN 360 or ESPN E60 or it was 30 for 30, and I see that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm totally going to bring that up to Jen. You know, but it was because it was like, even back then, the who's who of winners in college coaching, regardless of the sport, were emphasizing mental training, emphasizing all of those things. And so, now, even being in our position, we're seeing it's almost like the fourth or fifth, sometimes third question that we're getting asked about from a college coach. Whenever, you know, hey, I saw this and this, and I was looking through this. Hey, so tell me about the mental game. Like, tell me where she's at mentally. Mm-hmm. And for the first couple of times, you know, I've always been asked that, but I'll bet in the last year, would you say? In the last year, the frequency of that has skyrocketed. Tell us a little bit about that. Or first, I guess, tell us a little bit about Fast Pitch Fit and your background and kind of how this specialization came to be.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions in there. First of all, I'm super pumped to be here. I was listening to some of your old episodes and listening how deep you guys go. So I'm pumped to go as deep and on all this topic because there was so much to talk about. Mental toughness is such a huge, huge concept that you could talk about it 1,000 different ways. So how did this come to be? I had this obsession when I was like in second grade. I wanted to change the world. In fact, I would actually get my fellow second grade classmates to quit and leave recess to come into the library to try to figure out how to save the animals. And that, and so I've always had this concept of like, how does one person actually make a difference to impact the world around us? And that same year, second grade, I also started playing softball. And about that same time, my parents got me our first video camera. So I became in love with both playing softball because that's fun and just love with making movies. And so as I grew up and developed, I did both of those things. I would make video and play softball. When I was in high school, I actually made recruiting videos for other softball players, and something you're probably pretty familiar with. Got that scholarship to my dream school, had a really unique college experience. And once I got there, I thought, like most athletes probably do, whenever I got there, well, then I would be confident. Then I would feel good because I worked my whole life to get to this goal. And then I get there and I find out, oh, that I don't actually feel that way. I started noticing I was in between these two places, between what I call the imposter. Oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe it was a mistake. My roommate made more money than I did, all this stuff. And what I call the rooster. And the rooster is the person who, wakes up in the morning and crows about it and says, I'm the only one who really cares. I'm the only one who's busting their butt, doing extra. And is coach ever going to notice me? Because I had that freshman mentality of I'm going to come in here and, make an impact right away. And then after I ended up, I actually had an opportunity to play both at Division I and NAIA. And so through this unique experience, when I got out, I realized there was so much more that I wish I had known growing up about what makes a great athlete and what makes you successful. And so I went into business at that time, and I started learning from these really successful entrepreneurs and these Olympians and these people who were professional athletes. And they started teaching me these things like, why didn't I learn this before? It would have changed my whole outlook on everything. So I became obsessed with, okay, this information is out there. How can we get this to kids way younger? And I became obsessed with how can I use my skills and my love for softball, use my passions for making video, and break these concepts down that the best, most successful high performers in the world are using, and break them down to where a 10-year-old softball player can understand them and use them to experience more joy and fun and fulfillment in their young lives. So that's kind of how we got started.
So why it's obviously always been the mental aspect. I mean, even if you track all the way back to the baseball days, I mean, you've probably seen like people sharing the pictures and quotes and stuff where, famous hitters in Major League Baseball talked about, as 90% mental and 10% physical, and
Right.
things like that. It's obviously always been known, but why, especially, not just over the last year, but especially like the last 3 years, has there been like a higher frequency, more of a focus at not just the travel ball level, but even at the college level? Like it seems like, not just the travel ball level, the college coaches are giving, how do I say it? They're giving an advantage to the kids who are mentally tougher, where from an outside looking in, I may look and go, oh my gosh, how did that kid get that position over that kid? But then I find out, this kid's mental toughness is just off the charts.
Or I've seen the coaches change who absolutely didn't believe in it at all 3 years ago to now are totally on board. What was that shift?
I think, well, it's kind of like a wave that comes, right? There's the early adopters and then the people who join on. So we've been talking about mental toughness since the ancient Greeks. Like if you go back and look at how they trained their athletes back for the Olympics a long time ago, they also did mind, body, spirit training. Okay, so this isn't anything new by any stretch of the imagination. But if you remember, not that long ago, speed and agility training was also new, right? And in fact, you've seen even in high schools now they do speed and agility training. I was watching Shark Tank the other day, and Alex Rodriguez was on there as a guest, and he was talking about how when he first started playing in the game, there would be professional baseball players that were in the locker room eating pizza and chicken wings before the game, right? A whole pizza. And he said that doesn't happen today because information spreads. I think it's just a side effect of the time we're living in society, where it's so fast and easy to share information, where before only a small percentage of people would dive down deep enough to read the books to get the information about these small tweaks in mindset or emotional management, state management, identity training, visualization, meditation. These things, it's kind of a side effect of where we're going in society. And so as that ball starts rolling and people start seeing the impact of it, it's only natural for more and more schools to adopt it, and eventually high schools. And I believe the next step, it'll be standard for, you know, most travel teams to have some kind of mental performance element training that's consistent across the board.
Well, and that kind of brings our next question, where is this something that is, being an expert in that area from your position, do you place the obligation on the individual, or do you place the obligation on the team? Or, you know, obviously the level of importance with it is skyrocketing by the day, by the month. It's becoming a huge thing. So the question we started getting a whole lot was, you know, is that something that, you know, as an individual, you know, as a prospect, as an individual player, that she should start, you know, honing in on, focusing in on? But then I've also got some travel coaches that are asking me, you know, hey, how do I implement mental training, you know, into my team? You know, is that a team thing, an individual thing, or is it a combination?
I think it's all of the above. That's kind of like saying, do you practice on your own, or do you only practice with your team? I mean, do you practice throwing? It's like, who's responsible for teaching a kid the alphabet? Is it the individual's responsibility, or the teacher, or the parent? Like, I mean, it's all of the above. And, you know, there's four main things that are going to determine whether you're successful or not. Okay, there's four main things. The first is, how clear are your goals? The second thing is, what are your habits like? And the third thing is, what is your community? And so if your community, if your team, if the people that you're around are also practicing these mental performance skill sets and adding these tools to the tool bank, and these are the things you're talking about, and you're holding yourselves accountable, and you're getting excited about, oh, hey, I learned this new skill set, I learned this new tool, this new mental tool, I've been practicing this, it's going to encourage you to go deeper into it. And so it's very much a huge advantage when you're surrounding yourself with other people who also share that same love for learning and growing that you do. But ultimately, it's your game, it's your life. You got to take responsibility for how deep you want to go.
Okay. So what's your opinion on it? Like, what, kind of like we were talking about earlier, why is it people talk about it early on in youth sports, but it seems like when they get to what we would call the recruitable age, it's almost like they're more willing to let their 7 and 8 year old fail and go through a hard time than they are their 12 or 13 year old. Once they become 12 or 13, it's like they almost think that their kid does no wrong and makes no mistake and has a perfect game every game. So why is that?
So it sounds like, you know, you're talking about a very specific element of mental performance, which is, how do you deal with failure, right? Which is a small sliver of the big picture. And why is it that it's okay for my 8-year-old to strike out and you're like, hey, good job. And then whenever they turn, you know, 14, you're like, they could have hit a home run, and you're saying, well, on that one pitch, you shouldn't have swung at the high one, right? Like that kind of nitpicking stuff. So I think that right now there's a lot of pressure on parents. There's a lot of pressure on parents. They're stressed out. How am I going to afford college? They want more than anything for their kid to be successful. And there's a lot of ideas and opinions out there of what that looks like. And so they feel the pressure, the peer pressure from other parents and what they read on social media and all of this misinformation that you guys talk about, that you guys point out and poke holes in, is they feel the pressure, like, and they start to believe that by putting that extra pressure on them or not allowing them to fail, that they're actually doing them a favor. And it's easy to fall into that trap. I mean, as a coach, I've fallen into that trap before, where you start to almost think it looks bad on you as a coach if your athletes fail. And we all have these egos, right? That it's like, well, if my team doesn't perform well, it looks bad on me, which isn't the case. And yet we fall into that trap. And I think parents, it's so hard today because of all of the comparing that goes on, that we want to protect our kids, and so I think it's with the best intentions. It's just not actually going to get them the results that they want for their athlete.
Makes sense.
Absolutely.
How does all that translate into life skills? Like, kind of like we were talking about, like some of the best CEOs and some of the best, like you talk about entrepreneurs and stuff, you know, that those were people that, you know, they will clearly tell you on TV. They know that if they're going after 10 things, they expect 9 of them to fail, you know, and they're going with that mindset, but you know, prepared. how does, which I know you're going to get to in a minute, I was intrigued by the fact that you're working with much younger travel ball players all the way up to and through the recruitable age, which is huge because if they continue, if they will do their due diligence and continue with what you've trained them on, we all know what type of player that is, by the time they're graduating. So how does that translate into life skills?
It's everything. It's everything. It's not even, I don't even, honestly, like, I have this page called Fast Bitch Fit. I love softball. I really don't even care if they take this and they keep playing softball or not. I really don't. Like, I use it because it's a tool, and, it's hard to talk about these mental skills without a place to practice them. And so softball, I mean, even today, I'm so grateful that I have the sport, like, in my reservoir of knowledge, because I use so many metaphors from sports in everything else I do, in my relationship with my husband, in my health, in my business, with all of my goals. So it's not about the game at all. The game is the teacher, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. How does it translate to life skills?
You hit it right on the head.
Yeah. It's not. If I'm going to talk to a kid about visualization, it's so easy to talk to them about visualization in regards to hitting or pitching, right? And if you were to talk about visualization and what you want your life to look like, or what you want your relationships to feel like, that would be a lot more intangible and hard for them to immediately see results on. So if I can teach them the skills on the softball field. Sorry, I got a little interruption there. Are you still there?
Yeah. We can hear
Okay.
you now.
Yeah, okay, good. So if I can teach those kids, if I can teach the kids early on, how to deal with failure, then later on they always remember, oh yeah, I only have to be successful 3 times out of 10, and like, things are good, things aren't so bad, which we don't always see in today's social media world.
Yeah. What about, like, I know, like, and we talk about it all the time, one of the things in our position that stinks the most is when we saw a kid as an 8th grader or a freshman and fell in love with the kid. The kid has talent. Everything looked beautiful for the kid at that point. But then fast forward 2 years later or 3 years later, because they felt like they had everything handled. And 2 or 3 years later, as we go to follow up or go to check back in because they haven't heard anything. I know this weekend, this last weekend, I'm in the vehicle with my wife, and I get a message, and I guess I had a distinct look on my face. And she's like, "Oh, what is it?" And I let her look at it, because I got a Facebook message back from this stud that I saw 2 years ago, and she was confident everything was going to happen for her, and confident in those that were advising her. And then all of a sudden, her message is, "Hey, Coach Wilson, I appreciate you checking back in. I've actually decided not to play college ball. I just wasn't getting the attention that I wanted, so I guess I'm just going to give it up and focus on mine." And not that that's a bad thing, but kind of like I told my wife, like, those are the ones that kill me, because there was such so much travel, there was so much showcasing, so much going to camp, so many emails that never went anywhere, that all of a sudden, rather than facing failure, the kid took themselves out of the equation. And I think in the last 30 days, I've found 10 to 12 of those. As we start all of a sudden having more coaches reach back out saying, "Hey, Robbie, this happened for this 2018," or "Hey, I need this in 2019. And even though that may be working on 2022 and 23, this situation happened and they need this. So naturally, we start going back to our hot list. And I'll bet 50% of them have decided not to play college ball, basically pulling themselves out of the equation rather than face failure.
Right. I mean, and you would talk about life skills. I mean, that's a huge example, is how many times do people not ever even start something because they're scared to fail? So there's a big difference between a kid saying, "I give up." I was scared because maybe I wasn't going to get recruited, and it's easier to pull myself out than to really go for it and get rejected, right? There's less believed pain around that. If I pull myself out, I'm in control, compared to I go all in and I get rejected. But there's a big difference between that and a kid that says, "You know what, like, my heart's really not in it and I'm deciding to do something else." And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a big misconception. It's like, I don't want to waste all this money and time and energy on travel ball if my kid's not going to decide to go play. And there's nothing wrong with a kid saying, you know what, I had a good run, I had a lot of fun, I made a lot of really great relationships, I learned all these skills, now I want to go pursue this thing over here. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just understanding what's really in that kid's heart, and is it really fear, or is it really a change of heart? And there's no way for you to know, there's no way for me to know, only that kid can really know the truth. And when we as coaches and influencers, that's one of the things I love about what you do is your guides, right? You can ask the questions and help them dig down to really uncover that, and then encourage them when it is just fear. And it's just to your point. I mean, I had a girl on my travel team. She'd already graduated her senior year, and then she got recruited by a major D1 school in Colorado on the spot after seeing her, catch a couple balls because they needed that particular athlete at that time. And so there's always those opportunities, and it's just a shift. Is the kid scared, or are they really just having a change of heart?
I have a quick question and kind of leading in. We have a lot of different recruits at different ages, and we're talking about a mental side that really only the individual can control really what goes on. So I get a lot of questions about, well, how do I quantify the results? What do you say to those kids that, we live in a day and age where these kids want immediate results. Like, if it doesn't work now, forget it. How do you measure? What's the best answer to tell a kid, this is how we measure how you're growing? Because again, there's no, it's not a batting average and it's not a RBI. This is something that happens in your own, in between the ears. How do we help our kids measure the mental, how well it's working?
That is a really, really good question. And I've worked really, really hard on a good answer for that. Okay. Because I've done the same thing for me, even in my own life. I want to model the things I'm asking my athletes to do. So over this last year, I'm like, I've got these specific goals, and my goals were around those invisible things. The mental game is invisible, right? We can't see it. So how do I know if I'm having more joy in my life? How do I measure if my relationships are quality? How do I measure my energy and my vitality? Those are very intangible, hard to measure things. And so I had to create my own score sheet, just like I would on statistics. So an easy thing to do for an athlete would, oh, hey, Stacy, I see Stacy Mahoy's on. She's awesome too. So an easy thing to do for an athlete is to find out, what are the three main feelings or emotions that they want to feel at the end of a season, for example. So, I do this clinic, I go around, it's called Best Season Ever. And one of the questions I ask is, if you were to have your best season ever, how would you feel? And get clear around that, because a lot of times we never get clear on our goals. And so by the time the season rolls around, you might improve in your batting average, you might get faster and stronger, all these amazing things could happen. But because we're also increasing in competition, and as soon as you hit that next level, well, now it's not so cool, right? It's like a kid that learns to do a cool dive off the diving board, and they think, I'm never going to be able to do that. But once they can do it, they're like, well, that's no big deal. What's the next big thing I can do? And so that happens in sports too. So as we improve and get better, we're also more and more critical of ourselves. So having those measurables that you can keep track of to show actual growth is good. So that way we can reflect, oh, hey, you got better in this area and this area. But then also, how do you want to feel? So once you know those three areas that an athlete wants to feel a certain way, now we can create scores. And it's an emotional score. It's not based on anything other than how I feel on any given day, right? And we can give ourselves scores on that. So for example, I do this in my own life every day. I've got my joy, my energy, and the quality of my relationships. I've got 5 actionable actions I do for each one of those. Check whether or not I do them. And then I give myself a score on 1 to 10. How do I feel? How do I rate myself? Robbie, I heard you saying, on ABC, you were asking your daughter after she played, how did you feel like you did that day? A B-, B+, that kind of thing. And then, okay, why do I feel that way? What are the things I need to focus on that I can actually do to shift that? And then we teach the kids specific tools they can do to change their emotions around those feelings. Because it's not like I'm just going to wake up one day and I'm going to feel confident. I've got to choose every single day to feel confident in order to look back and say, you know what, I'm a confident person. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's kind of like what we were talking about beforehand, before talking to you was, if you're the word training and you hear fitness training, and then you hear mental training, you hear leadership training. With any type of training, if there's not a method of measurement and a time frame of consistent reassessment, and based on those results. And so, like, even to the point of, we have, even in corporate America, you have different methodologies of, whether it is monthly, weekly, quarterly, whatever it is, of assessing your employees and their productivity, and are they meeting goals, and if not, why are they not? And so regardless of what it is, having a measuring aspect, having an accountability aspect, and being willing to modify different things, is it the same application when we're talking about this?
I think so. I don't think you need to necessarily have that measurement in place in order to start getting introduced to mental performance skills. When you first start learning the game, you're learning how to hold the ball and how to throw and how to hold your hands on the bat. You're not saying what's your batting average. You don't even start looking at statistics until you get to a certain level. And so I don't think that that's critical for someone to get started. I think when you're really trying to make those fine tunes, so if you're working with an elite athlete or at the college level, professional level, this might be something you'd really dig into. For me, it's been important because, as a mental performance coach, I had to find a way to quantify, hey, show the parents, like, look, we really are making progress here. And that was a big challenge for me in the first few years. It's like, it was hard to quantify. So I've had to work really hard at, they might see different things, but new challenges always come up. So you've got to have a way to point back and say, look, here's where we're growing and here's where we're going to work. And so you don't need to have it right up front, but when you really want to make those fine tunes, where you focus is going to grow. Where you focus is going to improve. And so when you have those measuring tools, like you said, it's really going to help.
Yeah, for me, I've been a former college coach of 15 years, and the last 10 as a head coach at Division II level, and I use mental training every single day. My former players will tell you, I started practice off at least 5 to 10 minutes because it is a skill that you have to learn. I had so many freshmen would come in and have a clue. Maybe they went to sleep. I don't know. I didn't care, but at some point they realized into their junior year they would start to get it. And however I needed to reach them in that. But I'm a full believer in this is something that has, just like you said, you didn't learn to throw a ball right away. It's baby steps. So, for me, mental training is a huge part of our game. It's a game of errors. So you have to learn how to be able to manage that mental, that what you say to yourself, what your mind thinks your body will produce. I've got 100 different things I could say about it, but
right. Well, you made a really good point. You made a really good point on that too. You said, however, I need to teach it to them. And kind of like hitting. There's some people who go about teaching hitting and they're like, this is the way I teach hitting. And they basically train like robot style, right? And then there's other people that say, I'm going to take 1,000 different ways. I'm going to have 1,000 different ways to teach hitting. So that way I can teach this athlete this way. I need 1,000 ways to teach one athlete, not one way to teach 1,000 athletes. And same thing with mental performance.
That was exactly my next question.
Go ahead and say the question.
It was just that, as you probably heard us talk about, like, one of my pet peeves is a hitting instructor that thinks that there's this way. Yeah. And they don't take, like, I am a firm believer that there is a multitude of ways, but based on the kid's body type and based on what her strengths and weaknesses are, there's a different method that makes her work. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't open stance, closed stance, linear, rotational, mix. I don't care if it is, hacksaw. I don't care which way it is. If she's effective, I don't care if she puts a pickle on or a pickle in her ear and a blindfold on. If she mashes the ball, I'm interested. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It doesn't mean it work for the next kid, but if it works for her, I'm down. And so my thought process with this was, okay, and this is lack of knowledge on my part with this, is there this uniform way of being able to train, or is there, once you really dive into it, is there more of an individual application of mental training per the player?
So let's take an aspect, a slice. We'll kind of zoom in for a second to give a metaphor, and then that'll give a bigger picture. So let's take the concept of meditation, which other people might term mindfulness. Okay. So this is a term that some people might be like, oh, meditation, that's really woo-woo. Other people are like, yeah, it totally makes sense. I'm just relaxing my brain so I can get in the zone, so I can be focused, so I can be clear. So there's some people who can sit on a couch with their hands like hum and just clear their mind and just watch their thoughts float by. And some people are like, I could never do that. My brain won't stop chattering. I'm one of those people. Like my brain, no. As soon as I sit down and be quiet, yeah. Another way that you could practice that would be through yoga, right? So you're moving, and so you're focusing on your breath. Another way that you could practice that would be through hitting a softball. You could actually train yourself to meditate while you're hitting, and the whole process, the whole goal would be that you're not judging the outcome of where the ball goes, and you're just being present and feeling, what do I feel in my body? What do I feel in my body? What do I feel in my body? And that's another way that you could go about it. That's just one micro tool, right? There's a lot of different mental parts of the game, all the invisible things. But that's just one example. There could be a lot of different ways you could teach a kid to be mindful of their emotions and to create that gap so they're not so reactive. So when something doesn't go their way, they're like, immediately reacting. We just want to create that little bit of space so they can breathe, they can be clear, they can stay in the zone longer. There's a lot of different ways you could teach just that. Now, you multiply that over all of the different aspects of the mental game. I mean, I couldn't even write a book big enough to to cover over it. So, I mean, we could talk about this probably every week and never run out of topics to talk about.
Yeah.
I would love that.
So,
she's like, let's do it. Sign us up. Let's do it.
I've gotten a couple of texts asking, so like, what about like the individual athlete, the individual prospect that has approached this topic with their team and it wasn't necessarily a priority with their tribal coach or with, the head of their organization, but the kid wants to begin herself, wants to start working on her mental training herself. What are her initial steps?
Google. So it kind of depends on what is it that she wants to create for her? What is she trying to create in her game? Is it that she's getting frustrated? What's the challenge she's trying to overcome? Is it that she's getting frustrated? Is it that she is being hard on herself? Is she noticing that self-talk? Is she having trouble communicating with her teammates or with her coach? Does she not feel confident or relaxed in the box? So what is that thing that she wants to overcome? The first step, I would say, go to your coach and say, hey, coach, I'm really interested in this one area of the mental game. Do you have any resources for me? I mean, I think if nothing else, that'll let the coach know, hey, this kid's interested, right? That's a great way to go about it. There's so many great resources online, books that they can read. I can come up with a list. Books are huge, right? Videos are huge. I'm trying to take a lot of the stuff I learned from books and put them in a video so kids get excited about watching them. But I mean, there is so much information out there. It just kind of comes down to what's the specific outcome that they're looking for, the challenge they're trying to overcome in their life right now.
Gotcha. What about like a couple of the other messages are travel coaches that are watching right now that are asking, and I know some of them have asked us before the show, but they're in application, it's things that they brought to us, hey, how do I begin implementing this with my players? Because they've seen also a rise, not just in the necessity for it, but in college coaches assessing it. And I guess this sounds horrible, but I guess you don't necessarily want that to be the reason, but it's almost like paying attention to the mental aspect of everything. I'll take the reason we got there.
Yep.
Or if it's only because college coaches are looking, but I think it's almost like they don't take into account that most major league teams and AAA teams, I mean, they have a sports psychologist at their will, and even to the point of, if they notice that this guy's normally a motor mouth and he's been quiet for a couple of days, he's got to go sit down with the sports psychologist and go talk, and it's not that he's got to go sit down and, break down life and everything, or that it's, he's just having, or he's depressed or anything. It's, there's something going on mentally, and they want to talk to him about it and how he can make sure that that's not affecting what's going on with his performance. Does that make sense?
I think I want to just tail on that. Some travel ball coaches think it's a touchy-feely type of subject, yes, and they're like, I'm not dealing with it. But right, again, if you don't have that mental edge, I feel like the physical side can't come. It's like, to me, keep doing what you're doing and expect a different result. That's insanity. So why not, like, if we can get our kids to be more positive, whether it works or doesn't, isn't it more fun to be positive?
So that's 100%, that's where we start, right? Especially for a coach that's not comfortable. Because I think for a lot of coaches, I mean, even myself in the past, there's times where we feel like we just don't know enough. We don't feel like we know enough to speak intelligently. So we just avoid it altogether because we don't want to pass along information that's not accurate. So if a coach isn't comfortable and they're scared, like, well, what if I give misinformation or this isn't my zone of expertise? They're going to focus on what they know because they're comfortable and confident there, which is interesting because it's actually modeling the exact opposite of what we want to show our kids, to be willing to do things that they're not comfortable with, especially in regards to the game, to grow. And so I think one of the places I start, you mentioned, is how can we have more fun? How can we make the game more fun, especially at the most basic level? Because is it fun when you're playing in a game, you're losing, and the whole team sitting there on the bench like, well, I can't wait for this game to be over? Like, that's not fun. So, and as a coach, how, before I can really take and teach this to my kids, let's look at our own selves. What are the things that we're struggling with as a coach? Because chances are, if I'm struggling with it as a coach, whether it's the voices in the stands that are kind of getting in my ear a little bit, or feeling like people are judging me, chances are my athletes are dealing with that too. And a lot of times I think as a coach, or coaches, we got to look at ourselves and how we're modeling everything first. We brought it up earlier about dealing with failure, right? How do we teach our kids to deal with failure? Well, as a coach, you got to be able to deal with failure too and model what that's supposed to look like. So if we start there, being curious, just out of straight up curiosity, one of the tools I love to give coaches is you don't have to lead it. Let your players lead it. Ask your players, hey, what do you think about this? Recently, I did a mini clinic with a team that I coach, and I said, hey, guys, here's what we're going to do. We had about an hour and a half. I said, you guys are going to create a game, and the point of the game is that as you play the game, you get better, or you get closer towards reaching your goals, okay? So I'm going to walk you through the very beginning of this, and then you guys are going to create the game all on your own. So we sat in a room. I said, all right, so first we got to get clear on what are everybody's goals. So we wrote them all on a whiteboard. Each person, here's their individual goal. Mine was, I want to be able to do a pull-up. One of them is, I want to hit a home run. I want to throw 60 miles an hour. I want to be nicer to myself. They've got all these different random goals. I said, all right, split them into two categories. The girls split them on their own into physical goals and mental goals. I didn't tell them to do this. They did it, okay? Now I said, okay, you guys are in your two teams. Your goal is to create a game that you can play. While you play the game, you're going to be doing activities that help you reach your goal. You've got to be able to keep score, right, and be able to track growth. And I had a few other questions that helped guide them through this process so they could do it. And by the end, we had these two teams. They gave a presentation on what their game was. One team came up with the concept of a bucket list, and on this bucket list was all these things they were going to do to help increase their confidence and their self-talk. So it was things like put sticky notes on the mirror that tell me how awesome I am. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to download a meditation tool and listen to this. This was all them. They're 13, 14 years old. I didn't tell them any of this. They got on Google, looked it up, and came up with a list of all these things they were going to do. One of their things on the list was eat dark chocolate because it releases antioxidants in their brain. One of the things was, I'm going to take a bubble bath and listen to whale noises because it's relaxing. Like, if it works. Right, if it works, but they were excited about it. And that's the point, is I didn't say, hey, here's what you're going to do to get mentally tough and be more confident. They created it. They were excited about it. And now they're starting to check off those buckets. That was just one of the games they created. The other team had a completely separate thing. So as a coach, we don't have to know all the answers. We just got to have some good questions.
So, and that's what me and Manny were just talking about. So, like, I'm assuming those were girls that were anywhere from 13 to 18, right?
These girls in particular were 13 and 14, yep.
And so I guess that's kind of my next question is when we're talking about mental training, we're talking about leadership training, how early is too early to start implementing this as an individual? How early is too early to start implementing this as a team?
I see you shaking your head. She's like, it's never too early. I can see it. I can read your mind. I mean, I was understanding emotions at the most fundamental level, getting a kid to understand, oh, I'm angry. Why am I angry? What can I do with this anger? Oh, I'm sad. Why am I sad? When did this sadness start? What do I do about this? I mean, you could start teaching kids that very, very young, just being able to articulate their feelings. This is a skill that in general our generation is very poor at. We don't have a lot of experience being able to articulate our feelings. This is work that I've had to personally do hardcore over the last couple of years on myself, is realizing for me, I would have a feeling and then I would instantly negate it and say, oh, that's not what I'm actually feeling, and I would make up this other thing, right? And so that's just one aspect, right? So there's no early to age. I think teams can implement it very early. Simple things like posture, how you move your body, those very simple things. It doesn't have to be this woo-woo, like way out there thing. It's just, how do we talk about the invisible aspects of the game that build momentum for your team to be successful?
Okay. So, and I guess one of the additives to that is that one of the reasons that I know, like in my time of coaching, my emphasis was up. You probably figured, I don't like the thought that I'm getting old. So
none of us do.
In a million different ways. So I'm a very big kid, physically and hypothetically. So I get in trouble at my household just as much as my kids do. That being said, when it comes to how I coach and how I relate with my kids, I was not short of being an idiot or wearing a mask or embarrassing them. But I figured out, and I don't know down to the nitty gritty the reasons or the methodology or science behind it like you do. But I knew if I kept them acting stupid and being stupid, that they could think less and let their body perform. And so I know have a different approach of see yourself hitting the ball and doing this type of stuff. But like I had some hitters that they would go to get, and I knew how they were. They'd go to get in the box, and I would look over at them and I would rub my belly or something. And other people thought it was a signal when really what I was doing was I was rubbing my belly because it was big, or something like, or I would say, something incredibly idiotic that would get them laughing and be like, you're so stupid, Robbie. And they step in the box and mash the ball. You know what I mean? And
I totally know what you mean.
Like even to the point of like, and I know they posted a video a couple of days ago, but I know like Corey Line, he's always had individual handshakes with each player that he does before a game. And I know that's something that, he's always done, and there's been videos before this weekend, but like even, my wife turns around, she's like, hey, look what I saw, and like shows it to me on Facebook where like you see each one of their he's going down the line, and each one of them have some individual little weird thing that they do, but you can see like they're just having a blast making fun of each other doing it, and he's getting them to forget about the seriousness of the game.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a funny phrase, the seriousness of the game. I think that's funny. Because it's a game, right? It's just a funny, we have a joke on my team. I was like, girls, there's a fine line between being serious and having fun. Because there was a day we heard somebody say that, and it made me laugh, and so we joke about that now. So I'm with you, and how we relate to our players. One is going to evolve over time as the athletes have different personalities and stuff, and you're going to relate to your players different than I do, different than this coach over here does, different than that coach over there does. And so being true to that relationship and building the rapport in a way that's authentic is most important. If you try to go coach like Coach Candrea, right, it's not going to work because that's not you. And so you've got to be authentic with who you are, and we coach at the level we coach at, and we don't have to try to be something different than that. Being what those kids need there in that moment is perfect.
And I'm a big avid reader, and I know a lot of my prospects are. And I'll give, I think Bailey's mom said, I give my kids book lists from ones I personally read. Just quickly, what's your top mental book? What's your number one favorite book?
My number one favorite book, probably a Tony Robbins book. A lot of my favorite books are not sports specific books. They're books in other areas that I then translate to sports. There's a recent one I just read called, I think, Putting Out of My Mind, which is a golf book. And I liked that one. Heads Up Baseball is really popular. I think that in anything that you read, right? Not anything, but I mean, even in some fiction books that you read, if you dig into it, you can take a good life lesson out of it. So it's whatever the kid reads, how can we relate to what they're interested in? How can we take a lesson out of that? I mean, you can take mental performance lessons out of Harry Potter if you want to, right? It's let's get the kid interested in what they're interested in and turn it into a lesson.
So, which is another one of the questions that we just know about. So, those that are viewing, not just viewing live right now, but the ones like the viewers that are going to be watching this, over the next several weeks, next several months, whether it is a player that is wanting to get in touch with you, or it is a team or an organization that wants to figure out how to get you to come work with their team and build the foundation for this for them. What are their next steps for getting in touch with you, getting the ball rolling with you?
So I created something special just for the people that watch this video, and I put it up on my Fast Pitch Fit homepage for now. So one of the questions you told me that you were probably going to ask was, how does somebody get started with mental performance? And I think that's a really good question that I haven't really answered before. I mean, I talk about mental performance. I will even come on and teach very specific things, but how do you get started from a big, broad spectrum? So what I'm going to do is, if you go to fastpitchfit.com right now, there's a little questionnaire, and then they can go fill it in, and it'll say, what's your number one challenge that you want to overcome? And I'm going to send them this new Kickstart plan for how to elevate your game using mental performance. I've got some other videos and resources, like how to create more drive in your athletes. I'll send them out that as well. That'll be a great way for them to get started. They can email me directly at info@fastpitchfit.com if they want to schedule a mental performance clinic. A lot of coaches, especially the ones we were talking about that may not be comfortable, that is a great way for them to build a foundation, because I can give some very specific language that they can then use and carry throughout their season. So that's a really great option. And then, of course, Facebook and Instagram, Fast Pitch Fit. We'll be posting lots more videos and resources out there just for free that you can pass along to your players or parents too.
When we get off the live show, which is what I just got a message to ask, is there any way that once we get done with the show, would you mind putting those in the comments?
Oh yeah, sure, not a problem at all. Yeah,
and
I can do that.
Obviously, some of them are going to be direct to the website, some of them are going to be Facebook, some of them are going to be Instagram. But I know, obviously, we run across, like we said, a lot of different people who claim to be in the field. What we have seen, and obviously, me and you have known each other, through the same circles for years. Everybody that I know that has ended up doing the bringing you in to meet with their team or their organization swears by you, and so it's not a coincidence, and it's not just, we talk a lot, not just at the recruitable age, but you hear a lot in college, and anybody who lives, eats, and breathes softball, you hear them talk about grow the game. And I know you're not just thinking just softball specific, but grow the game. And I think this is going to be the next, the most pivotal aspect that we have to get more attention and have to get implemented. It's what's going to separate those big, the best organizations from the organizations that are good but can't.
I want to speak to that, because you're absolutely right, and I want to just talk about this zoomed out on like a universal aspect for just a second, because I go on these clinics and I speak all across the U.S. and in Canada now, and I would say there's this question that I ask in every session. I ask the girls, I said, on any average week, what are the top 6 or 7 emotions that you feel on any average week? And I just have them write it down, and they all write it down on their sheet of paper, and then I go around and I say, what did you write down? What did you write down? And they throw out all these words. And consistently, no matter what state I'm in, where I'm at, what age I'm talking to, whether it's an 8-year-old or an 18-year-old, 80% of what they say is, I feel stressed. I feel tired. I feel exhausted. 15% is, I feel hungry, mad, angry, sad, or worthless. And maybe 2 to 5% is happy or excited. So out of 100 kids I speak to, only a few are going to say happy or excited. The rest is stressed, tired, angry, mad, frustrated, worthless. These are the things they say. And so you're right. this is critical, not even just because of recruiting, but for the health of our young people that are eventually going to become leaders. Like, their brains are literally hardwired differently than yours are and differently than mine are because of the way our society is today. And the only way that we can fight that, and the only way we can give them tools, is to meet them where they're at. Well, if where they're at is softball and that's what they care about, let's talk about how to deal with emotions and how to deal with pressure, and how to do that in an area where they're excited about learning about it. And so one of the things I always aim to do is, how can I make this fun and entertaining, but also make it real and make it impact them and make it change their life, not just on their softball field, but everywhere else. If a kid is confident on the softball field, if they can go out and feel comfortable and go hit the ball, that feeling carries over into every aspect of their life. So if things aren't going well in other areas, we're like, you know what, at least when I'm on the field, everything else disappears. And that's why I believe it's so critical that teams do bring this in, and they do bring it to the organizations, and they make it a staple, whether that's me or there's lots of other people out there that are doing amazing things too. Lindsay Wilson for Positive Performance, Melanie Rushing, she's brand new, just started with Mental Performance. There's other people out there that are preaching this message. There's no reason for an organization not to say, you know what, instead of spending $400, $500 on this tournament, we're going to spend a weekend to focus on this because it's going to help them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's money. That's money. Hey, Jen, thank you so much. And please, kind of like we talked about, we don't intend on this being a one-off time of having you in. I think thus far, when we put out the message in a short period of time, let people know that you were going to be on the show and what you were going to be talking about. I mean, the messages and emails back saying, hey, could you talk about this? Could you talk about that? Could you talk to her about this? Hey, can you send me her info? So if you can, please don't forget, as soon as we get off the show, if you can, comment with your email, your Facebook link, Instagram link, website, and then obviously, in the weeks to come and the shows to come, we'll definitely be not just talking to you about having you back on the show, obviously. But
I would love to. Yeah, we could talk. Yeah.
About
I was going to say,
Andy actually has in being able to work with our prospects on a whole nother level.
I would love to do that. I think what you guys bring to the table for them is just that extra level of mentorship and support. I would love to be able to work with you and bring them the mental side, however that makes sense for you guys. I would say that with the people that I see lots of questions coming in, if they go to Fast Pitch Fit and they type in the question, what I'll do, Robbie, for you too, is I'm going to take all the questions that get sent in. I'm going to answer all of the questions, and then I'll make sure that you have access to that, so that way you can pass it along to your friends and NSR family as well.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you both so much. Had a great time with you guys tonight.
Thanks, Jen. And guys, that's what we got for today. Like I said, here shortly, Jen's going to go through and answer those questions. And as you can see why we basically made the decision that these other subtopics needed to be pushed to the side. As far as, we could talk about mental training, we could talk about the mental aspect of everything for days and days. We could talk about it in relation to the game, in relation to your daily life. We could talk about it in relation to it being spring right now and high school ball, and some of y'all are either not getting the time that you deserve, or you're not in the position that you're supposed to be in, or whatever the case is. This time of the year is where a lot of girls have to have a gut check. And it's where, this stud shortstop who has one of the best sticks in the state is all of a sudden playing first base and having somebody else hit for him for some odd reason. Does it make sense to any of us? No. Does it make sense to anybody else? No. But you got to take the love on the chin, and if you have the right coping mechanisms and the right support system, you can deal with it. So make sure Jen will actually comment here in just a minute with all of those links, and then appreciate all y'all being on, and we'll make sure that here over the next several weeks, as we go to include more stuff with Jen and about mental training with our athletes, we'll make sure to get you guys all clued in. We'll see you at the next tournament.